Hello, Adi. It's wonderful to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
We have so many different topics to explore, but I'd like to begin with your own journey and how you became a nomadic architect. So, could you tell us a bit how this happened?
Well, it's quite a story, and let's say I pretty much follow, like, let's say the standard script of what you should do as an adult, right? So I went to architecture school. I got a really good job at one of the biggest firms in Israel, and I just felt like I'm fading away. You know, that feeling when you're just like, it's funny because I'm repeating my Tedx. You know, you have that question, right? You tick all the boxes and you just go like, okay, is that all there is? Like, is this is what life's about? Am I supposed to be, I don't know, happy when it's a weekend and tired on Monday morning and more than that, I just felt that like I'm not using my creative skills as much as I can. And I just wondered, how would it look like if I'll try and get, you know, and use more of like my skills and my, um, you know, um, anyways, so make a long story short, so about 4 years ago, I decided to sell all my belongings and go on a one-way ticket journey to places that I always wanted to be in. I had that idea that I want to, you know, experience places with my own senses, like get lost in streets and just, you know, just be part of the world and not just sitting in a box and thinking about it. So then at the time, I didn't really knew I was still going to be an architect. I had a few projects that I was working on remotely. But then I just knew that the lifestyle is not what this is not how I want to live. And just knowing that, I went into the unknown, to different places, starting with Japan and then Philippines and Hong Kong, and like pretty much all over. And then I met architecture from a different place where I discovered I can be an architect while traveling, because apparently, for some mysterious reason, people wanted to work with me. And then later on, I understood why. So when you travel a lot, you get this like kind of global mindset that is pretty different from, let's say, an architect that is only designing in one country. So most of my clients now are like they see themselves as global citizens, are very, very well traveled. And when they want to, you know, they fell in love with a place and they want to start a project there, it could be either their dream home or a hotel or a retreat center, it doesn't really matter. They're looking for someone who can do the mediation between how they feel, like all they saw and all the things that like they experienced on their journey, and the actual place, right? They want to live in Guatemala for a certain reason, in Thailand for a certain reason, and then we want to respect the local heritage and to do something that is sustainable, but at the same time have that international, you know, mindset and vibe and like super comfortable. And this is where I fit in, because they need someone who been there and understand that and knows how to do that. So that's me.
That's so wonderful. You combine basically your architecture background with your traveling, and at first you didn't see how they would merge, but then you saw that you could actually take them and put them together and combine them so that you have a unique solution pretty much, because I imagine it's quite uncommon for architects to
It's
do
very uncommon.
that. Wonderful, wonderful. The more unique, the better. And now, what's your key message about? So, this is a bit how you work, the type of clients you have. What's the underlying message? Why is architecture so important to you?
That's a really good question. Um, yeah, basically, I think like I think we all know at some point, at some level, that like the spaces, what we designs us back, right? So the places that we live in has a tremendous amount on our well-being, our mood, our body. We can all feel it, right? So let's say if you go into a place, we all had that experience, right? You walk into a place and you immediately feel like, you know, you breathe deeper and you just go like, oh, I want to live here. You know, I love this place. Like what about this place makes it so wonderful, inviting, relaxing, cozy. And then we also had like the other experience, right? When you go into a place and you just, something doesn't feel right. It's just like, you can't wait to live this place. You can't wait to escape. I don't know if it's like the ceilings are too low or it's dark, or it just feels, I don't know, it's something about your gut feeling, that sense. So what makes a place great, and how can I create those kind of great places for my clients? So basically my mission in life is to understand how I can use architecture to empower people to be to their highest potential, to be as creative as they can be, as productive as they can be. And there's so many, like this topic is huge, and I think it's going to take me a lifetime or two to figure things out, but it is quite an interesting journey.
Yes, the impact of the environment isn't something that we often think about. I feel that we all sort of notice it consciously or subconsciously, but we don't always take the time to actually realize, oh, in this space, I feel at ease, I feel inspired, I feel creative, and in this space, I feel confined and restricted. Do you think it's the same for all of us, or do you think there are certain aspects that are similar for everyone, or do you think everyone is very different?
I think there's a few things that are common to all of us as human beings, right? As like the way our brain is wired, and the way like we all have physical body that is our, let's say it's our compass to experience the environment, is always in relation to our body, our height, our senses, the skin, how we experience temperature. But I think we all have different background, right? We have a cultural background. If you go into my website, I wrote a manifesto about it. And there's a component that I love talking about, which I called your memory palette. Like I can also call it your aesthetic DNA. Like what makes you enjoy certain places and why? And I think it goes way back into our childhood and into like the places we grew up in. And if you'll take two mood boards of different people, they'll never look the same. So we have like a few things that are common to all people. I think, let's say if we're talking about, have you heard about biophilic design? Okay. Philia, love, bio, biology, or nature, you can say. So basically this approach says that we are part of nature. We can never, if you think of the way we live today in cities and in buildings, this is only very recent that we live in this urban setting, being apart from nature, controlling the temperature and the light, and you know, being apart from whatever is going on in the world. I remember in the first firm that I used to work with um, we were on the 26th floor of this tower, and I couldn't tell if it's a hot day, what's going on outside. We had this fixed temperature all day, all year round, and it just felt so detached, like I'm not part of life. I'm, you know, away on the ivory tower, and you know, not being part of life, of society. And if you take it into like one step forward, so our bodies, like our biology is wired to interact with nature. And we have studies today that are talking about like different experiences that we evolved, um, you know, having those experiences, for example, having prospect and refuge. It's like one of the best human experiences we can have, right? So whenever, if you think about, if you want to book out an hotel room, right? So what will you look for? We'll like to have a prospect, which means we can see this distant view. It's also very good for our, let's say, survival instincts. We can look far into the horizon and see potential threats or resources. And then at the same time, we want to feel refuge, right? So we want to feel like we're being held. It means that we'll have from above and from our back, we'll feel safe. So let's say if you think about a window seat, that it's something that let's say, I don't know, 99.9 of people would like to have in their dream project. You get that sense of like, it's super cozy, I'm really protected and safe, but I can look far away. And there's something about those experiences that really interact with our, you know, with how we evolved as human beings. So we have some things that are mutual to all of us, and we have things that are specific to you and me and how we grew up and what we find inspiring. And it's really interesting to find that harmony between those two.
This is wonderful. I've never heard of this prospect and refuge, and I'm just imagining this long view and all this light. I'm thinking, yeah, I don't know anyone who wouldn't like that. I'm wondering, can you give us an example of something specific, maybe something you specifically like or one of your clients that isn't universal?
Yeah, of course. So let's say now I'm working on a project in Portugal, designing for a client from Germany, and she traveled the world and she collected some items that she want to use in the design. So we have that thing about items, right? That it's almost like they have a story to tell. And then whenever one of the things we want to do is we're going to use some old wooden Portuguese doors in the project because we don't want it to feel new. So when we talked about, let's say, for example, the Japanese wabi-sabi, there's an aesthetic approach saying that it's almost like the beauty of imperfection. So when you see an item, why do we love antiques so much? So when you see an item and you can sense like the time, you can feel like it's not new out of the factory, it has a story, and there's something about us that is like, it talks to us on a deeper level, right? We can connect with it, we can reflect on our own stories. So we're gonna have some Portuguese antiques, and we're also gonna have some items she collected over the years. And I think for her to be in there surrounded with like the stories of her journeys would be something very, very powerful. And also before that, I want to say that there's a process that I do with my clients that it's called the architecture of vision creating. And what we do there, we really go deep into your memory palette and your aesthetic DNA, and we try to understand what kind of spaces supports you. So let's say if we go on your mood, like we'll go over your mood board. It's not about like, some people show you magazines and say, oh, I want to have a house like this. It's not about that house. It's about like, what about this image that really, talks to your soul? Why? Is it the height of the ceiling? Is it the material? Is it the light? Is it the scale? Is it the view from the window, which a lot of people can really completely get mixed up because of a beautiful view, but they'll like nothing else about that space. So whenever you look like, let's do something together, right? So I want you to think of a place that made a strong impression on you, that you physically been to, not in
Yes.
a
Okay, I've
picture.
got one.
All right. So what about does that place made this impression?
I'm thinking the natural materials. It was in Bali. It was all woods and loads of
Mm.
flowers. So when you left, there were loads of plants and flowers. The sounds were also nice. That's external environment, not the actual place. Everything
Mm-hmm.
felt calm, but it did have also a view on the rice field. The rice fields were kind of dry, so I think it's even more beautiful when they're green. But yes, and the people were super nice, which is also part of the environment. The people
Of
you
course.
connected with. So yes, so that's the place that came to my mind.
Amazing. So, you mentioned wood. It's funny, I did this exercise last week on Clubhouse with a few friends, and they all mentioned wood. So there's something about wood, like it's not only that it reduces heart rate and like, blood pressure, and it improves cognitive function. And, there are so many things that are connected to either seeing nature or having nature around us, having uh, there was a study about a classroom that took the same test in two different classrooms. So one of them had wood surface tables and the other had plastics. You already know the answer, right? And so it's amazing how our body responds to materials, and we don't use that knowledge whenever we want to design an office space, whenever we want to design, imagine hospitals. Most hospitals doesn't feel like a place you can heal in. It feels like it has a lot of stress. It's very bright. It's not at all relaxing. And there was another study at a hospital saying that patients that had a room with a green view, the healing time was reduced in 1/3, right? In 30% compared to a room that had urban view. So it's not only about the well-being of the patient, it also saves a lot of money for the hospital. So we have that knowledge, and let's use it whenever we want to design our living environment.
That's incredible. Yes. And I think you're right. You probably think about these things all the time because it's your area of expertise and it's what you love and it's what you've studied and it's what you work in. But I think the everyday person, when designing their own office or their home, might take it into account a bit. I know for myself that I do take lighting into account a lot. I even
Mm-hmm.
think I'm slightly obsessed with it, but it's
Ooh.
because the lighting in my home for me has a huge impact. So if it's these big bright white lights compared to soft yellow lights, this I've really felt. But I think this can be propagated to so many areas. I want to ask, how should people think about their work environment compared to their home environment? Because I imagine that both of them feel quite different and there are ways to optimize both. So if we're looking, for instance, at the work environment, what are sort of some key elements that can help people, have higher performance or feel better in their work?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. And it feels, I don't know, in a way after 2020, right? After like with COVID and everything, I feel like the boundaries are really mixed. Like, we work from home, we have social life at work. So it all kind of blurs. But when I think about it, so let's say if we want to, like, let's say future of work is not about quantity, it's about quality. It's not about having a lot things done. It's about being really creative and using your skills in the best possible way. So when I'm thinking about designing a work environment, it means that I need to allow people to have a choice, to have like different mindsets, and then they can, like, you never have good ideas whenever you just sit in front of blank paper, right? So to have, let's say, let's talk about feelings. Okay, so whenever I want to design an office space, I'll make it feel like an adventure. I make it feel like there is a space that will keep changing. So I don't know, every week when I'll go to the office, it will look new. It will have different ideas, different inspirations from around the world. And then I'll have a place where I can chill, you know, talking like going full zen, lots of plants, water. Whenever you feel overwhelmed or I don't know, you need to think of something, you'll go there for 15 minutes and clear your mind. And then you go back to, you know, being with your team or doing things together. So I'm just talking about creating many different situations, and like practical design advice would be daylight, would be using natural materials, would be not an open space. That's probably the worst you can do for people. We want to have thermal variety. We don't want to have the same temperature. Like we don't like, it's really bad for you to have like the whole day long the same temperature. So today we have systems that can kind of like create different conditions during the day and kind of like imitate the day, right? We don't want to be separated from life. And when you talk about your home environment, then this is like where you go to recharge. So it should be like super welcoming and really, really cozy. And it should have all your favorite items and never too busy, I think, for me personally. Yeah, it's kind of like a big topic to answer quickly, but I think you got the so we always want to create a feeling, we always want to create an atmosphere, and then we'll think about what are the architectural tools we can use to support that. Like, how am I going to create that feeling or that atmosphere? And then I'm like, okay, it might be really good to put, I don't know, to have one room of the office facing the street and have, I don't know, every day 1 hour where people can come and, I don't know, have an open conversation about what we're doing, to host workshops there and just keep that flow of information. So you want to be connected to the city, but then we also create like the other end of that scope, which would be like complete silence and like going inwards and allowing that.
This is amazing. Like total
Sorry.
trance, Adi. I have to think about my questions. You can't like hypnotize me like this with your words. Otherwise, how could I think of the next question? I was thinking in general that I didn't even know about this temperature thing. I never even thought about the fact that outside the temperature varies, but indoors we keep it the same all the time. This is terrible. You suddenly made me realize this is not good. But in general, what you said at the beginning about us being aligned and in tune with nature, so important.
Yeah, when we can, we feel so modern and advanced, and we can, we can overcome everything, right? I can have a huge glass ceiling facing west, and I don't mind about the greenhouse effect and the sun coming in, because I can just turn on my AC and I'll be fine. But it's more than that. It's more than that. And of course, I don't say people need to freeze, right? If they live in northern countries or things like that. It's just that we want to experience some variation in what we feel during the day. We don't want to have that same. It also feels really boring, right? To have the same temperature. It's like living the same day over and over again. It doesn't make any sense.
I've literally never thought about this. You just blew my mind, like something I have never, ever, ever thought about in my entire life. It's the temperature of the inside. Because I have thought about materials, and I have thought about lighting, and I have thought about the space, although there's a lot of things that you shared that I didn't necessarily know specifically. But yes, the temperature. And I'm wondering what is the alternative? So the alternative are the systems that regulate a bit the temperature and change it throughout the day.
Yeah, or as much as we can to use, passive ventilation and like sustainable design instead of like, it's funny to call it sustainable design, because for me, it's just design that makes sense, right? What did we do, I don't know, 100 years ago, before we had all those sophisticated systems, right? So in certain parts of the world, you'll have earth houses. In other parts, you use bamboo, and you would use forms that allow, like, we have resources for free. We have the sun and we have the wind. Why not use it, right? It just depends on the layout of the house, on the shape of the roof. If you're going to invite the wind in and ventilate the place. There was a house that I visited in the desert in Israel. Well, let's go to the source, Morocco, right? You can go there to, like, it's desert, it's boiling hot, but you'll go inside a house that has this 1 meter wide, like 1 meter earth construction walls, and it's chill. And in the winter, it's warm. And in the summer, it's cold. So we don't have to, invent the wheel. We already have that knowledge. We just have to use it in a new modern way. So then we don't have to spend a lot of energy building a structure that doesn't fit the climate, and then use more energy to try and, regulate it to something that we feel comfortable with. It's just design that makes sense. Use whatever you have around you, use the knowledge that already exists, and then do it in like a cool, fun, funky way.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a lot of things like this, I feel, in life that are made overly complicated, when in fact, like you said, going back to how people used to do it 100 years ago or in a different way, used to already apply this knowledge that sort of seems to have been forgotten in some ways. Do you have a few quick tips in the last, couple of minutes that we have for people who are looking to reconnect maybe a bit more with their environment, that being their physical environment where they live or where they work, and the sort of tools or things that they can put in place to work on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, just a second. Okay, so I think the best tip I can give is I want people to start paying attention to details, or to whatever works for them. So even you, let's say today after this call, I don't know where you're going next, but try and kind of like have your radar on and see what works for you. So let's say if you enter a cafe and you think, oh, I love this place, stop for a second and ask why. And really try to put your architect lens there, and kind of like look at it from a different point of view and say, why do I love this place? Is it the size of the window? Is it the way that I don't know, like the chairs are facing each other instead of facing the street, and it invites conversation? So when you start noticing and like being very, very specific about what works in each place, then you can start building your own memory palette and like being aware of it. So next time you want to I don't know, rent a new office space or move to a new house, you already know what are the key components that really feels good to you. You don't have to be an architect to do that. You just have to ask questions. So that would be my tip.
Yes, I love this. I think, again, it's about raising that awareness so that if you understand what works best for you, whether it's in a work environment or home environment, you can start to reproduce it. That's why it's so nice and so inspiring when we have the opportunities to go to new places or new countries, you know, to
Yeah,
see the things that we like from them, because we can reproduce or use them, or even use photographs of those places as mementos to take us
yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really connected also to the work that you do, right? You don't force people to work, I don't know, 8 hours a day. You just, okay, so like see what works for you and let's amplify this. And then, yeah, and on that other note, right, you know, traveling the world is really inspiring. It's like almost I have this archive in my head, this idea bank of all the places that I've been to, all the things that I saw, and all the things that inspired me. And sometimes, yeah, I'll take a photo or I'll put it in my sketchbook, like, oh, I really like the scale of this place. Let's see what's the ratio is, or things like this. And then we can use the same kind of volumes that really feels good and use it to create something new.
Yes, this is so smart. And once you say it, it feels obvious. But how often, and I'm asking the listeners now, how often do you go into a place, check, write down what is this specifically that you like about it and what inspires you? I think it's pretty rare. So this is a wonderful tip. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, you don't even have to be aware that you're doing it. Most of the information we process is being processed subconsciously. So like this exercise is just to bring it to your conscious mind, but you're doing it anyway. It's just if you want to use it, then start working with it, start being more aware, and then you can have that new experience of being in places.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Adi. This has gone by super quickly. This has been
Yeah,
so
not like
interesting.
5 minutes.
Yes, it did. It did. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Adi.
Thank you for having me. Have a beautiful day, everyone.
Yes, you too.